What's going on, guys, and welcome to another episode of Dirty Dersch Fishing. And in today's video, I'm going to be headed to Bass Pro Shops to not only show you guys how I modify my jig, but I'm also going to be telling you guys some tips and tricks to use when you're out fishing. So, I just got back from Bass Pro Shops, and not only did I buy the jigs I said I was gonna buy, I also am gonna show you guys my favorite trailers. Today I'm gonna be talking about colors, types of jigs, where to throw jigs, stuff like that. And guys, just remember, this is the tactics that I use here in the Northeast. Where you live, things might be a little bit different and other colors might work. Now, time to get into this bag and show you guys what I got. All right, let's start with the jigs. All right, now these are the two identical jigs I bought. They're the same color, they're the same size, they're the same brand, they're the same style jig. So these are literally the exact same jig. And when I modify it, you guys are going to see a pretty big difference in the two jigs. Now first, I'm just gonna show you guys how I modify my jigs, and then I'm gonna go over the types, the places to throw, the different colors to use. But before I modify my jig, I just wanna show you guys what else I got. I actually picked up this War Eagle spinnerbait on sale for almost 50% off. This thing was only like $4.50. And now I'm gonna show you guys my favorite trailer to use on jigs of all time. First one might be a little obvious, it's just a Rage Craw, and I love the action on this. I actually use this all year round on a jig. You guys know I love the paddle tail swim bait. I caught a 5.5 pounder, my very first bass of the year, and there's still ice on the pond I was fishing. That's just the power of a paddle tail swim bait. Plus, if you put it on a jig, it's just game over from there. So these, by far, are my two favorite trailers to throw on jigs. And on top of that, if you don't feel like throwing this on a jig, because the jig's kind of a bulkier profile and you want to throw a shaky head, just throw either of these on a shaky head and they work great. Now, the way I modify my jig is very, very simple. But in my opinion, it can be the difference between a bite and not a bite. But first, let's just open these up. All right, there's one jig. If you guys are interested about the color is Okeechobee Craw. So these are what it looks like out of the package. They're the exact same lure. And how I'm gonna modify it is super simple. All you need is a pair of scissors. I got these Rapala scissors from Walmart. I think they were like $2.99. All right, so how I modify my jig is what you wanna do is you wanna straighten out the skirt. See how I'm straightening out that skirt like that? So it goes over the head of the bait and over the hook of the bait. All right, now you're gonna take your scissors and at the head of the bait, just snip off that skirt that goes around the head of the bait. I actually missed a spot right here, so I'll go back. All right, so this is what the jig looks like right now, but I'm not quite done yet. I'm gonna go back again with the scissors and really trim up that skirt. Now, I know some people will actually trim up the weed guard, but Contrary to popular belief, I love having a really stiff weed guard because that just means I get snagged a lot less in heavy cover. And what I do, since I keep this weed guard the way it is, nice and sturdy and strong, all I have to do is set the hook a little bit harder. And one more thing with this jig here, I'll cut the skirt all the way to the back of the hook. That way the skirt is just about even. That way the skirt is just about even with the hook. Now, as you guys can tell, the bait I modified has a lot smaller profile than this big bulky jig. Alright, this is the modified jig on the right, and as you guys can tell, it looks a lot different from where it started. But I actually modify my jig like this for a couple of reasons. One, because there's not that many big fish around where I live. Some people actually go their whole lives in New Hampshire without catching a 5-pound bass. Like, the state record is only 10 pounds and that was caught back in the 60s. But anyway, that's the first reason why I modify this, is just because there's not too many big fish around where I live. And the second reason I modify my jig like this is because all this skirt here can sometimes get in the way of the action of your trailer. Especially something like a rage craw, because a rage craw really likes to kick its legs while you reel it in. Because this skirt right here can sometimes impede the trailer in the way it swims. Like on this jig, the skirt won't get in the way and it'll be free to swim like that. This can sometimes, depending on how long the skirt is, can kind of impede the leg, so they'll be really struggling to swim in the water. I'll show you guys what I mean right now. Let's open this Strike King package up right here. And let's take out 2 rage craws here. Now, when I put trailers on my jigs, I automatically rip probably half of it off. So now, if you guys can see the difference, just push it up all the way. And there you guys go. That is a look at the exact jig that I would use. And see what I mean too? If this skirt was longer down to here, then it would impede the swimming action of my trailer. Now I'm gonna tell you guys the 3 different types of jigs that I use. The first kind of jig I use is what I use the most is I just call it a swimming jig. And that's kinda the kind that I bought today at Bass Pro. This head of it kinda has a very rough shape like this. This kind is what I use the most. The second kind I use most often is a football style jig. And I actually went to Bass Pro Shops and I bought a football style jig. Football style jigs is exactly like the name implies. It's shaped just like a football. Now let me show you guys what I mean. See what I mean by how it kind of looks like a football? So you got a football style jig here, and then you have what I use the most, which I just call a swim jig. And then there's a third type of jig that I use, but I use this one kind of rarely because there's not very many places that kind of sell this style. And that is what I call an arky style jig. It's kind of in between a swim jig and a football style jig. But this one kind of looks like this. I know that's kind of a bad representation of it, but that's very roughly what it looks like. It's somewhere in between. Now I'm going to tell you guys where and when I use the football style jig. Now, the football style jig is actually very simple. Where I use this is very simple. I use it in rocks, and more rocks. Boom. But you guys get the picture. I literally will only throw this football style jig when there is a bunch of rocks around. Why? Because this football style head really helps you stay out of the cracks in between rocks. And unfortunately, it does not matter if you're using 80-pound braid. If your jig head gets stuck in a crack in a rock, you're not getting it back. Now onto my favorite jig. This one, right here. The one I bought at Bass Pro Shops today, what I call a swim jig. I throw this jig everywhere at any time with any trailer on it, and it produces fish, and it produces big fish too. Now, I'm not really gonna go over the Arky style jig because I rarely use that kind of jig. These two right here are literally the only two jigs that I'll use like 99% of the time, is a football head and just a regular swimming jig. Now, before I finish this video, I just want to go over the colors of the jigs I use. Majority of the time, does not matter what color, all really colored jigs catch fish, but there are very specific times that I'll use specific colors. In the springtime, during the bluegill spawn, I'll try to use like a green pumpkin, kind of bluegill imitation. That's one exception to my rule. The other exception to my rule is if you have really dirty or stained water, darker color is better, preferably black. I've actually had some pretty good luck on just straight black jigs in some chocolate milk colored water. And another thing is, when you're fishing really stained water, you really don't want to modify the jig like I did today in this video. You really want to have the biggest, bulkiest profile you can, just so it creates more commotion in the water. Now, another kind of myth is you have to match up your jig with the jig trailer. Like in today's video, I bought some Okeechobee craw jigs. You don't really have to match that up with an Okeechobee colored trailer. I actually caught a 6-pound bass on a green pumpkin jig with a bright orange trailer. So you really don't need to match up the colors. You can if you want, but I really hope you guys learned something out of today's video. I kind of actually had a little fun making it. I normally don't sit at home and make tips and tricks videos, but since today we had a tornado warning where I lived, I decided, why not just head to Bass Pro Shops, buy a couple jigs, and show some people how I modify my jig. And you never know, you might catch a 6-pounder just like I did. Actually, if I can figure out how to like promote videos, it'll be right here. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Peace.
Chuki got the sauce.